Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in our listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. So today we're actually going to have a panel of experts that are available to answer your questions via the Q&A panel, which is located at the bottom right of your screen. So if you'd like to submit a question, please make sure to go to the Q&A panel and use the All Panelist options from the drop-down menu. This allows all of our panelists to see your question and ensures that you are more likely to get a response. The chat panel will be set to one way so that we can send you helpful information. At the end of the webinar, we will open up the lines and take your questions through the WebEx audio. For this portion, we will ask the participants to use the raise hand icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen, to let us know that you have a question. You will be allowed to come off mute to ask your question. And just as a reminder, when we call your name, please unmute yourself. And all of the materials for this webinar will be available through the Census Academy website, and we'll be sure to send the link out through the chat. So again, thank you all so much for joining us, and it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Tyson Weister.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you all for joining the webinar this afternoon, Navigating Geographic Complexities on data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister. I work on the communications team in the Center for Enterprise Dissemination, and we are the area responsible for data.census.gov as well as our public application programming interface. For today's webinar, we're going to focus specifically on how to navigate and understand the breadth of geographic options available to you on data.census.gov. Before we dive into the live demonstration, we'll talk about some basic information that you should be aware of related to geographies on data.census.gov. And then at the end of the session, our goal is that you're going to feel comfortable accessing geographies through two separate pathways. One is through the summary level filter option. Another is through the geographic entity filters. Along the way, we'll show you how to make maps as well, both to map data as well as to understand visually the geography that you've selected to make sure that it is aligning with what you intended to select. And then we'll also show you at the end how to make selections for geographic components such as urban and rural. Before we dive into that live demonstration, I wanted to make sure that everyone had this geography hierarchy chart handy. This shows you common geographic levels available at the Census Bureau and the relationships between them. So as you can see, you can get data at the national level, and it goes all the way down to small geographies such as census tracts, block groups, and blocks. So census blocks are the smallest geographic unit of analysis. Census blocks can be grouped into block groups, which can then be grouped into census tracts all the way up to the nation. Anywhere on this chart where you see geographies connected by direct lines, it shows you the relationship between those geographies. So as an example, you can see for zip code tabulation areas, we're going to be working with those in our example today. There's a direct line from zip code tabulation areas up to the nation. So that means that zip code areas are fully contained within national boundaries, but they don't necessarily bear any relationship to other geographies, such as states, school districts, or census tracts, because there are no direct lines connecting those two geographic levels. So the direct lines means that the lower level geography fits neatly within the higher level geography. This is also called a nesting relationship. Moving on to geographic availability, the level of detail you can get in terms of geography depends on ultimately the data that you're trying to access. So for the decennial census, we currently have that data on our site back to the census 2000 through the most recent releases. Those data go down to the block level. So that's the most detailed geographic availability is through the decennial. The next most comprehensive geographic availability is through the American Community Survey, or ACS. That program goes down to the block group level. And we have data from the 2010 ACS through the most recent release on our site. We also have economic census and selected surveys dating back to 2012. Now, those data sets, as the smallest level of analysis, go down to zip codes, economic places, and counties. If you'd like a detailed listing of all the data set availability on our site, we do encourage you to check out the link included here. So with that background, let's dive into some tips and demonstrations on ways to access more complex geographies. So first thing I want to show you is the summary level filters. So there are two primary ways that you can select your geography just through the filter panel alone on data.census.gov. One is the summary levels tab. And I like to use this tab anytime I know the 3-digit summary level code associated with my geographic level. The summary levels tab will provide access to all levels of geography, and they are organized numerically by that 3-digit code. So you don't have to know the 3-digit code in order to make a geography selection, but anytime you do, it's very easy to navigate to. So we're going to talk more about summary levels and how you might find out what summary level you need later on. For now, we're going to focus on simply navigating the pathway. And summary levels are nice because they uniquely identify that geographic level you're interested in. The summary level tab will show you the different options that are available. And I'm just showing here two examples of different geographies that are similar, but available through different summary levels. So especially in terms of accessing complex geographies, you'll often want to access data for areas of one geography that fall within another. So to lead up to this, here what I've shown you first is a selection for summary level 250 for the Navajo Nation Reservation and Off-Reservation Trust Land. This is summary level 250, the primary geographic level for American Indian areas, Alaska Native areas, and Hawaiian homelands. It means that it gives you data for the complete geography in its entirety, regardless of any other boundaries that it may intersect with. And we can see that visually here on the map. You're noticing the shaded area is the entire Navajo Nation reservation. If I were to have an interest for my data analysis in a more granular view of this particular geographic area, I could narrow this down and access the data just for the portion of this American Indian area that falls within Arizona. So here you can see an alternative option for a geographic selection I could make through summary level 260. This gives me the Arizona portion of the Navajo Nation Reservation and Off-Reservation Trust Land. And we see this visually in the shaded area on the right-hand side of the map. So in accessing data for full versus partial areas, there's a couple key steps and indications that I wanted you to be mindful of before we dive into the site. So in determining if you're accessing data for a full area, you'll typically notice that labels for full areas are shorter and cleaner compared to labels for partial areas. And we'll talk about that more in just a moment. You'll also notice anytime that you see the phrase fully/partially, that means it is giving you data for the full area, even if only part of the area falls within the indicated geography. So fully or partially does mean it's giving you data for the entire geographic area of reference. Partial areas tend to contain the phrase part in the label on data.census.gov. They also have longer labels. So notice rather than just saying American Indian area, Alaska Native area, Hawaiian homeland, it has the phrase state at the end. That indicates that it's giving me the state part. The label for the filter also has the phrase Arizona part. And again, it's always helpful to visually make sense of these areas by referencing on a map, and we're going to show that in the webinar later on. Another tip that I wanted to bring up before we dive into that demonstration is that if you select your data set first, the site will narrow the list of geography types just to those that are compatible with your data set. This is true if you're clicked into the Summary Levels tab. So I find this beneficial. There's over 240 different summary levels that you can possibly access data for at the Census Bureau, but we know earlier from our discussion that not every survey or every product is available for all 240 summary levels. So anytime that you want the system to hide options that are not compatible with your data set and just show you all of the detailed geographic options that are compatible, you can select your data set or topic first, click into the Summary Levels tab, and you will only see the clickable options. So let's see this in action with our first example. We're going to pull up data through the Summary Levels tab. Here, I'm going to access American Community Survey poverty totals for the Navajo Nation within the state of Arizona. So here we'll go to the live site. Using Google Chrome, I have data.census.gov pulled up, and here on the landing page, if you're accessing data for complex geographies, we're going to be working with the geography filter panel in the advanced search. So here we'll click advanced search. And on the left-hand side, we can see some options available. So this is giving you the most common geography options to choose from. For today's webinar, we're going to be working in the Geographies tab. Now, before I click into there, I did mention that it's helpful if you know your data set to select it first in some ways. So here I'm going to scroll down to Surveys and click American Community Survey. I'm going to choose the 5-year estimates and then choose the checkbox for detailed tables. Again, you don't have to know this information up front, but if you do, it may be helpful in narrowing your geography selection. So I have ACS 5-year estimates, detailed tables. By the way, this is the most comprehensive American Community Survey dataset in terms of geographic availability. Next, I'm going to click on the left-hand side where it says All Geographies, like I mentioned before. And then I'm going to click the Summary Levels tab. You'll notice when it's clicked, it's slightly shaded. This shows me every geographic level that is compatible with this data set, and it's hiding any other geographic level from my view. Notice that this list is sorted by the 3-digit geographic code associated with the level of geography. And I know the one that I want is 260 American Indian Area, Alaska Native Area, Hawaiian Homeland, State. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 260. One disadvantage of selecting your data set first is you do need to give the site a little bit more time to check everything. So this is going in real time and checking every single geographic selection to make sure it's compatible with what you've selected. Here we're getting, after making that, it's prompting us to choose the American Indian Area. I can scroll down to Navajo, or you can make use of the search bar at the top of this panel. And here I'll type in Navajo in order to get to that selection. So I'm going to click here again. Now it's saying no results found. It's actually still loading, trying to populate these options. Again, one disadvantage of selecting your data set first is you do need to give it more time to process through this geography filter panel. But the benefit of this is that you're not going to inadvertently click a geography selection that is not compatible with your data set, because the site is doing all of that work for you and hiding anything that's not compatible from your view entirely. And my connection here is a little slow. Usually it's loading faster, but there is more of a delay compared to if you're selecting your geography first. Here I'm ready to make my selection, so I'll click Arizona Part, Navajo Nation Reservation, and Off-Reservation Trust Land. The last thing I'm going to do is select my topic filter for poverty. So on the left-hand side, we'll choose Income and Poverty. Then I'm going to choose Poverty and mark the checkbox for poverty. You may see more than one box that seems relevant. I recommend making your first best guess. And if you'd like more details about search strategies, we recommend checking out some of our other webinars. Here, we're primarily going to focus on explaining the geography portions of these searches. At any rate, I have my dataset, topic, and geography selection. I'll go ahead and click the search button in the lower right, and then I'll click tables at the top. Looking at my list of results, I can see 71 tables that match this criteria. What I would be doing from here is skimming the list of table results and clicking any option that piques my interest. So you want to click the table ID, for instance, B17001, or the table title, poverty status in the past 12 months by sex, by age. So that's one table that was interesting to me based on what I was looking for. This is showing me that there are an estimated 94,308 people living in the Arizona portion of the Navajo Nation Reservation and off-reservation trust land. And out of that number, 33,269 are living below the poverty level. So the purpose of that primarily was to show you how to navigate the summary level tab and why you may want to select your data set first. Moving on to our next example, I wanted to show you the selection map so that you can visually make sense of any geography filter that you're clicking. Before we dive into that part of the live demonstration, this is just a quick screenshot showing you just how seamless it is to get this map to display on your screen. It's really 3 steps. First, you're going to choose your geography filter, and anytime you've selected just one geography filter, this is going to work very seamlessly for you. Your next step is you're going to click the Maps tab at the top, make sure you're clicked into the selection map, and then you'll be able to view your geography area right there on our site. So let's show you how you can make this selection and view the selection map using data.census.gov. And we're going to use the same geography selection we used in the first example. But of note, if this is not a geography you would normally use, know that you can use this strategy to verify the geography selection visually for just about any geography on our site. So to get started, I clicked the US Census logo in the upper left. That takes us fresh at the landing page, and then I'm going to click the advanced search link below the single search bar. Just like before, I'm going to make my geography selection, and I'm just going to make the geography selection this time. So on the left-hand side, I'll click all geographies. Just like before, I'll click summary levels. Notice that list instantly appeared. So it's not having to check to make sure that it's pulling just the list of levels compatible with ACS 5-year estimates detailed tables. It is allowing me to select any possible geography because I don't have any filters selected. So in this case, I'm still going to click into 260, American Indian Area, Alaska Native Area, Hawaiian Homeland State. Notice that instantly popped the list of all the American Indian areas in the United States. Just like before, I'll narrow down to the Navajo Nation, and then we get those 3 checkboxes. So that is much speedier in terms of loading of the filter panel if you choose to select your geography first. The only disadvantage is that it will give you access to try to select any possible level of geography, ultimately if that geography may or may not be compatible with the data that you're interested in. So it's up to you which order you want to select your filters in. I just did want to point out the advantages of each option and some of the drawbacks. At any rate, you've made your selection for any geography. If you go ahead and click the search button in the lower right, and then maps at the top is how you can get to the selection map. So typically this will automatically put you in the selection map. We can see the blue and orange bar showing that the selection map is here. And because we've only selected one geography filter, the site is smart enough to know that we want to see this specific geography on our map. It sets the boundaries to the geography level that we're interested in, and it zoomed us in automatically to the area. So this is a good visual indication for me. If I wasn't 100% sure as to what this geography selection meant in the filter panel, visually this is showing me I'm getting data just for the portion of the Navajo Nation that is in Arizona. And you can leverage this map. Zooming in, you'll see street lines and street labels populate. That may help you visually make sense of the area as well. And you can also see at the top hand section of the map, the layer is the primary boundaries that are shown on your map. So if you click into layer, because we've only selected one geography, the site was smart enough to know to automatically display the layer as American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian area, state. If you ever needed to manually change this, you do have the option to click layer and change your boundary to show a different level. But again, it's only going to highlight something that you've actually selected. So you typically wouldn't need to do anything with the layer, but just wanted you to be mindful of what it is and how to get to it in case you needed to manually change the layer to match the level of geography you selected. Now that you know how you can make a filter selection and view that visually on a map, let's talk about the second default pathway you can use to select your geography. It's through the geographic entity filters. In this example, we're also going to show you how to make a map of the geographies we selected. And when we say thematic map, we mean mapping data. So the second pathway to select geographies is to use the default geographic entities path. Rather than listing out each 240 plus summary levels of geographies that are available, what the geographic entities path does is it condenses multiple related summary levels into clickable categories. So if you weren't upfront familiar with the 3-digit summary level code associated with your geography, this option may be more intuitive for you to explore available geography options at the Census Bureau. It also hides some of the more complex geographic selections from your view to promote that you go to the most common geographies by default. So with that, we're going to explore how you can make some clicks. I'm going to show you this first on slide format. First, to access geographic entities, you'll make sure you're clicked into all geographies on the left and that the geographic entities tab is selected. And next, we'll break down how this works. So I mentioned that this geographic entities try to take you down the primary geography pathway by default. So if I were to choose county, it would then prompt me to select a state or choose a checkbox for all counties within the US. And ultimately, as you drill down further, you're going to get data for individual but complete counties. So when I say primary pathway, I'm meaning the pathway that will get you data for the full geographic area, so the full county, regardless of what other boundaries it may intersect with. So easy enough to get to those default pathways. If you want to get to the more complex geographic selections provided to you through the Geographic Entities tab, you're going to want to look at the Within Other Geographies option that's at the top of your panel. So here, it will be collapsed by default, but when you click Within Other Geographies, it will provide you more options to choose from. So in this screenshot, I'm showing that I selected the county level, And it was prompting me to select a state next, but rather than click into a state, I clicked within other geographies. And here I can click into additional summary levels. That makes sense for my analysis. So if I wanted the portion of a county that falls within an American Indian, Alaska Native, or Hawaiian homeland, I could choose within other geographies, choose this option, and it would take me down to different options to access detailed slivers of geographies. Another benefit of the Geographic Entities tab is in some cases it allows you to access unique options to select collections of geographies in a single click. And specifically, these are fully partially geographies. So in this example, which we're going to run through on the live site, I've selected zip code tabulation area. Then I selected Wisconsin, and then I clicked the within other geographies option. Here you could select to access zip codes within particular counties, cities, or other areas within Wisconsin. And these options happen to give you checkboxes with that fully partially language. This means, again, as a reminder from earlier in the webinar today, that you'll get data for the entire zip code tabulation area, regardless of whether the zip code area is fully within Milwaukee County or if only a small sliver of that zip code falls within Milwaukee County, you're still going to be getting data for the entire zip code area. So let's make sense of this a little bit more on the site by looking at data, maps, and filter panels. One last tip I wanted to point out, though, is that I mentioned earlier ways that you can go about finding the summary level associated with a geography. Anytime you've made a filter panel selection on our site, characters are being added to your URL that indicate your selection. So if we mark, for instance, an individual geography checkbox, if you look at the geography portion of your URL, starting with G equals, you'll notice 860, those first three characters, that's indicating the summary level. So if you'd like to reference that, you can do it right here on our site. If you were marking a checkbox that was selecting a collection of geographies in a single click, in the screenshot on the right-hand side, I'm showing where I've clicked all 5-digit zip code tabulation areas fully partially contained within Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. The summary level in that geography selection is indicated directly after the $sign. So you'll see $sign and then 860. So both of these are providing data for complete zip code selection. The first one gives data for a single zip code. The second option on the right provides data for multiple zip code tabulation areas. So now let's look at this. For our example, we're going to use the Geographic Entities tab. We're going to look at median income for all zip code tabulation areas in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Here on the live site, I'm going to start fresh, click the US Census logo in the upper left, and go to the advanced search. On the left-hand side, I'm going to choose all geographies. Make sure that I'm clicked into the Geographic Entities tab by default. When I'm clicked there, I'll see all geographies, and they're going to be listed in alphabetical order. I won't see the 3-digit summary level codes. And as I scroll here, I'll go ahead and select zip code tabulation area. Now I wanted all zip codes in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. So I'll go ahead and choose Wisconsin. And if I happen to know offhand or have a list, I could individually mark the checkboxes for the zip code areas that were of interest to me. However, if I want the site to tell me what zip codes are fully or partially within Milwaukee County, rather than making a selection in the default panel, notice the within other geographies phrase at the top of this panel. Go ahead and click the plus sign or the word or phrase within other geographies, and you get additional options to choose from. So here I can specify to the site, I want to select the zip code tabulation areas within a county, not the options within the entire state. So I'll click where it says county. This now provides an option for me to drill into an individual county. I'll click Milwaukee County. And then here, this lists out every zip code tabulation area that is fully or partially within Milwaukee County. So I could select them individually. We also have a convenient checkbox at the top, all 5-digit zip code tabulation areas fully, partially contained within Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Once we make that selection, if I reference the URL, I'll see a $ and 860. That means the data are going to be provided through summary level 860. It means I get data for the entire zip code area, and we'll view this on a map. But to proceed with my search, I wanted income data. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to drill into income and poverty under the topics heading. Then I'll click income and earnings and income, households, families, individuals. Notice we're always looking for a checkbox as a final selection as we navigate through these panels. So I have my topic and my geography. I'll go ahead and click the search button in the lower right. Now we're going to be looking at a map, but I always recommend checking out the tables prior to going into the maps. So I'll click the Tables tab at the top. The reason that I recommend checking out the tables first is all of our maps are table-based. It means that you can make an estimate of any cell you see in a table and map that across all of your geographies, but you do need to know which table to click into that has the desired data you want to make a map of. So reading this table, S1901 income in the past 12 months, comes from the American Community Survey 5-year estimate subject tables. I see ZICTA 53110 is my first geography. And on the left-hand side, I see different rows of this data table. So here we can see in the first column, we're looking at household. And there is a row that says median income dollars. So the median household income for this zip code area is $66,592. As I scroll to the right, I could also look at median family income, median income for married coupled families, and other categories. And eventually I'll get to my next zip code area, 53126, that has a median income of $95,568. So from here, we've identified this table that has the data I want to make a map of. I can see it in a table format, but if you want to go one step further, you can also map it directly on our site. Multiple ways to get to the maps, just click the Maps tab at the top. There's also a convenient Maps button that you'll see at the top of the table. Once you've clicked that button, you'll want to make sure that you're still clicked on the left-hand side in the table that contains data you want to make a map of. Here we see the blue shading for S1901. Because we've selected one level of geography, the site has zoomed us into our selected area in Milwaukee, and it's showing zip code boundaries. We can confirm that by clicking Layer and see zip code tabulation area. And we also visually can see zip code tabulation areas on our map. So the last thing to do would be to tell the site, out of all of the estimates we saw in that data table, which one do we want to see on our map? At the top in the upper left where it says less than 10,000, you can click and change that from the very first estimate that happened to be in the table to any of the other estimates. So scrolling down, this is laid out in the same way that the data rows were in the table. So we had to scroll to get to median income. Notice here that median income is grayed out. The reason for this is that the tables always default to percentages when percentages are available, and median income is a numerical value. So you want to change at the bottom the units to say number. Once we do that, we'll notice it is clickable to choose median income. So we'll click median income dollars. And here the site is making that map in real time, working to load median income data across all zip code areas that are fully or partially within Milwaukee County. Now, if you're not familiar with the boundaries of Milwaukee County, you can turn those on for reference purposes. At the top of your map, there is a button called Boundaries. And once you click that, you can turn on and off boundary lines. Here I just turned by clicking the line to the left of county, as well as the labels. So now we see the county label Milwaukee, and the county boundaries are in that dark gray line. The other thin gray lines are indicating the zip code tabulation areas. So this is really helpful for reference purposes, again, to make more sense of the geography you selected and whether it represents what you intended, and helps you make sense of the data. So we do see that the site successfully provided data for every zip code that is fully or partially within Milwaukee County. This is showing us zip code areas with darker shades of blue have higher median incomes compared to zip code areas in lighter shades of blue. And I've been talking about this fully partially language, and that it gives you data for the entire area. So this is an example of a zip code area, 53126. It's part of our geography selection because at least some of the zip code does fall within Milwaukee County. So notice here that this little sliver is part of Milwaukee County, but the rest of the zip code area does happen to fall outside of the county. However, the boundary shown on our map is for the complete zip code area, which is consistent with what we would expect from summary level 860. And this is telling us when we click on this area, the median income is $95,568. So because this represents the entire zip code tabulation area, this is a median income that represents the entire area highlighted. It's not the median income just for this portion of people that live in Milwaukee County. So I always like to visually look at my geographies so that I'm crystal clear about what data I'm accessing and what it represents. Now that we've talked about how to make use of the mapping as well as the summary level and geographic entity filter pathways, I also wanted to show you how to select geographic components. Before that, I'll explain really quickly what geographic components are. They are adding up all of the data for individual geographies into one number that meet a certain criteria. So in this screenshot, in red, I'm showing all of the urban areas within Alabama. So if you were to access data for the geographic component, the urban portion or rural portion of Alabama, it would be adding up the data for either all of the areas shown in red for Alabama, or if accessing data for rural Alabama, all the data for all of the areas outside of the red boundaries. There are many different ways you can access data for geographic components. Some other popular geographic component options we have include data for people who live within a metropolitan or micropolitan statistical area, data for people who live outside of a metropolitan, micropolitan statistical area, or data for people who live on American Indian, Alaska Native area, or Hawaiian homelands. Again, this is providing data for all of the people who live in a geography of one of those levels. It would not be providing data for individual geographies such as the Huntsville, Alabama urban area or the Birmingham urban area in Alabama. You can access geographic components by using the Geographic Entities tab and looking for the tab that says Show Geographic Components. So these are very detailed geographies that most users don't need, but many users do find helpful. So in order to meet the needs of both users, we hide these advanced selections by default, but we do make it very easy by just making one click for you to see them. So let's show you an example of accessing data for the total population in urban and rural Alabama. I'm going to click the US Census logo in the upper left, and we're going to choose the advanced search once again. On the left-hand side, I'm going to click all geographies under the geographies heading. We're going to stay in the geographic entities tab. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose state. So I want the urban and rural portion of Alabama. So the first thing you want to do is choose that primary level of geography you're interested in. Notice that when I've made that selection, the geographic components, they're hidden by default, but you can click the second tab, Show Geographic Components, and the site is working to load all of the options that are available. There are many ways to slice and dice data for different portions of the state. So you want to pay very close attention of the labels that you're seeing. And if you want data for the urban and rural portions of Alabama, you would want to carefully scroll to Alabama Rural and mark the checkbox, and then Alabama Urban. Notice we have both of those selections in the upper left, and then on the right-hand or on the left-hand side, I'll go ahead and select my topic filter. I just want data for population total, so I'm going to select populations people, counts, estimates, and projections, and choose population total. Once you've made this selection, go ahead and click search and tables, and let's take a look at the data. This is showing us data for Alabama. It says that 2,900,880 people live in the urban portion of Alabama, and 2,123,399 people live in the rural portion of Alabama. If you add these two numbers up together, that would give you data for the entire population living in Alabama. The last tip I wanted to note is that you can also use the URL to select your geography, or you can edit the URL to select your geography. For the purpose of this webinar, just know that every time you make a geography selection, information is added to your URL. The first 3 characters for an individual geography selection will be the 3-digit summary level that we've noted earlier. So this tells us we're accessing data at the state level. 00 is the 2-digit geographic variant. Some geographies have certain vintages, so that would be what the variant would be. The next 2 characters, 01, is indicating the 2-digit geographic component. So in this case, 01 is the urban portion, and 43 is the rural portion. Next, you'll see US for United States, and then you'll see the FIPS codes. So in this case, 01 is the FIPS code for Alabama. If you'd like more information about geography IDs, I encourage you to visit the link at the bottom. But with that, you can take that knowledge that you may have and edit a URL in order to get data on our site. So this is another way to help people accessing data for complex geographies. If I wanted to change this selection from urban and rural portion of Alabama to the urban and rural portion of Georgia, I could change the code in my URL, the state code 01 for Alabama to 13 for Georgia, and do it again to get the rural data for Georgia and press enter. And if you know the codes, you can edit or add geography IDs to the URL. This will give you the equivalent updates as if you had selected the geographies using our filter panel or the maps. Notice that if you look in the upper left, we see the filters for Georgia rural and Georgia urban, and we also see the data. Right, as we start working towards questions, wanted to let you know if you click the feedback link Under the single search bar, we are working to continuously improve your access to data. So let us know how we can make data.census.gov work better for you by shooting us an email or clicking the feedback link. It's census.data@census.gov. We also have dedicated staff monitoring that email box who will respond to your data questions. And if you'd like to sign up for email updates, we have a QR code here in the upper right. You could do so now. This will take you to our email subscription page where you can choose data.census.gov updates and enter your email address. This will sign you up for our monthly newsletter that will let you know about the latest data releases, system enhancements, and educational opportunities. And wanted to note that we are also working to continue to improve our webinar offerings to you. So when you leave this webinar today, there will be a survey that automatically opens, and we would encourage you to let us know what went well, how we can do better, and also any other topics that you may think would be helpful for us to offer here for your training needs. And we're going to start taking questions verbally. I did want to mention up front, if you don't get a chance to ask your question, or if you have additional questions that you think of after this webinar, we have contact information for you here. If you're a member of the media, please reach out to pio@census.gov. Otherwise, please contact us at census.data@census.gov for your data questions. And if you have a training request, you can email us at ced.sci.outreach@census.gov. And Lisa, I think we're ready to give instructions to take verbal questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Tyson. In just a few moments, we're going to begin the audio question and answer session portion of this webinar. So a bit of a refresher on the instructions. To ask your question over the line, we invite you to please use the raise hand icon. And you can find that located next to your name in WebEx or at the bottom of your screen. When we call your name, please unmute yourself to ask your question. And just remember to allow a few seconds before you start to speak, because there is a bit of a lag. So you're more than welcome to start queuing up now. And before we open up those lines, I would invite you to, as Tyson said earlier, to give us your thoughts on today's webinar through a webinar survey form. So with that, if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand icon, and I will go ahead and unmute you. And as soon as you're unmuted, you may go ahead and begin speaking. We have a question from Millennia, and forgive me, we're just going to use your first name because I don't think I can pronounce that last name. So Millennia, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Millennia? We cannot hear you. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. So my question is, okay, my name is Milena, so you are almost on track. My question for Tyson is, when we go through this whole process to select and visualize on a map the type of geography and the type of tabular data we want, can we download the shapefile that we are seeing visualized?
I'm so glad you asked that. So we recently added an option. So it will be in GeoJSON format. It will be the boundary file. And I'm going to click here on the maps. If you had created a map and then clicked more tools at the top, and you do need to be clicked into a thematic map and have geography selected. So let me select some so you can see that button appear. More tools, you'll see GeoJSON. This would download boundary files in GeoJSON format at the state level in this case, because that's what I've selected, and it would specifically be the boundaries just for the states that I've selected. So hopefully that option is of use to you. If you don't use this option, you can also download the shape files from the Census Bureau's Tigerline shapefile product that's offered on census.gov through the Geography division.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, just a follow-up, you don't release the join table. You just release the geography as a GeoJSON, and then you have to join the table if you work in GIS to make usage of this data. Is that correct?
So let me add a little bit more detail to that. If you want the boundary file from our site, you would download the GeoJSON, and then the table data, if you wanted the tabular information, you would want to look at the zip file option. So you would go to the table view, you would choose zip. And once you download this, I'll give it a second to open up. You'll notice the progress bar in the lower right, and it should be loading up to 100%. There will be, in both sets of those files separately, a column called GeoID.
Yeah.
And then you'll see GeoID FQ in the boundary files. So FQ means fully qualified. Those two GeoIDs will be a one-to-one match. And the fully qualified GeoIDs were recently released into the Census Bureau's shapefile and boundary products. If you want a table that has the information pre-joined, there's also another product that the Census Bureau offers outside of this website that I showed today. It's called the Tigerline shapefiles with selected demographic and economic data. And that has some of the popular ACS data pre-joined with this shapefile. So you may want to check that product out to see if it meets your needs. Otherwise, yes, you would be looking at a download of the data through the zip button on data.census.gov, plus a download of the boundary files either through GeoJSON on data.census.gov or the standard Tigerline shapefile products, and then you would be joining those separately on your end.
Okay, thank you.
You are most welcome.
Okay, we have another question from, forgive me if this is not said correctly, but InQ. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Maria and Tyson. This is very helpful. I wrote this question in the question and answer as well. If there is time, Tyson, would you be able to show if I wanted the data in the table format over time, let's say like 2010 to 2020, like how would I get the data at the tract level?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I'm going to clear out some filters here. You'll notice that census tracts are a selectable geography. You can either click the words or phrase on the left that says census tract. You could go to all geographies and choose census tract, which, by the way, that would be the same exact option as if you had selected it conveniently here on the left hand, or you would choose summary level 140. So going down that pathway, you would at some point make a selection for one or more census tracts. I'm just going to select a few at random here once this panel loads. And then to access data over time, it's really going to involve, in almost all cases, two separate views and two separate table downloads. So you'll find those in a couple different ways. One is the product menu, which you can click, for instance, view all products, or you can click the product dropdown. Notice this allows you to switch between different products within 2020 as well as within 2010. So typically you would find the table view that you're interested for one, then you could click and download the zip file. And if you wanted to go ahead and download the 2010 data, you could also mark that. Either way you do it, it's still going to download separate files associated with each vintage you selected. The other way that you can sometimes find data over time is table IDs, or naming conventions can change between years. So if you thought that we, hey, maybe should or would have 2010 data on our site, but you didn't see it in the product here, there may be a different table ID. So for instance, if you were accessing this data back to the Census 2000, you would be looking for table ID that I believe is P001 or something to that effect. So sometimes table IDs can change over time, but the decennial census and American Community Survey typically will use the same table ID, and you would access the data over time by choosing a different product. And I mentioned that you would get 3 separate files associated with each vintage. The first 3 were for the 2010, the second 3 were for the 2020. And then typically you want to open up the zip file that ends in -data. And since this one downloaded successfully, I actually had wanted to show this during the last question. This is the GeoID that's in the first column that you would be matching if you were trying to make a map in your own software. And then this is a flat file format. So the zip option, a lot of people miss this because they click Excel or CSV buttons at the top of the table. That's always going to give you output that looks similar to what you see on screen. But most of the time, if you want to work with the data, you're looking for zip. And this provides the estimates in the table display without any special formatting or indentation. But it's really helpful if you'd like to work with it. And then the way that you would read this, I'm going to choose one at random here, column F. This is providing data for the total population who is Black or African American alone. And you read the variable name. P1 is the table ID. 004 is the 4th row of the table that has data. And N is for number. There are different endings depending on your data set. For instance, in the American Community Survey, E is for estimate, PE is for percent estimate, and M is for margin of error. So hopefully that would help understand the downloads in more detail, and also how you would get data over time. It would involve 2 separate downloads in most cases.
And as a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, you can use the raised hand icon that is located beside your name or at the bottom of your screen. And while we're waiting, Maria, were there any questions in the Q&A panel that needed to be asked of Tyson?
Yeah, I do have one. This is from Carrie in the Q&A panel. It has to do with the new address lookup that we have, Tyson. So it says, is there an equivalent bulk address option for the new street address geography lookup in the basic search bar for data.census.gov, meaning a tool that will include/return the same fields for street addresses? There are more fields than appear to be available through TigerWeb. I thought that might be good to mention since this is a newer feature.
Being a tool, I'm thinking through and reading this question as well. So bulk address option. So there's a couple different components to the question here. So just so everyone on the webinar is familiar, another way that you can select your geography is by typing in an address. And on the landing page for data.census.gov, you see a geography pin icon. That is how you populate the pop-up window in order to type in an address. So here I'm just going to type in 4600 Silver Hill Road in Suitland, Maryland, 20746. You could type in an address and click search. And if we recognize the address based on the census geocoder, this will give you a clickable list of every Census Bureau geography that this address falls within. So if you didn't know that this address fell within Census Tract 8024.05 or Congressional District 4, you can just type in the address and click one of these links in order to make that filter selection. So here we can see the filter in the upper left. And this would be equivalent to the other geography selection options we showed earlier, just a different way to get there. So in terms of, is there a bulk address option? There is not currently on data.census.gov a bulk address. So if you wanted this information on our site, you would need to do this one address at a time. If you were to use the Census Bureau's geocoder, they do have some bulk address options through the geocoder, as well as through the geocoder application programming interface or API. And if you needed assistance completing this task in bulk, I would recommend reaching out to them at geo.geography@census.gov or 301-763-1128. And then it sounds like that you're wanting the output similar to what was provided in the address search on data.census.gov. When I showed that list of clickable geographies, the geocoder will provide that same, or can provide that same information and more levels of geography. So it should be more comprehensive in comparison to TigerWeb. I'm not sure exactly what information you can get through TigerWeb mapping application based on address search. So I would recommend reaching out to Geography Division for more assistance, and we will also take your feedback that you would like this feature to have a bulk address option on data.census.gov. And at this time, I'll go ahead and provide some additional wrap-up information. One additional resource we wanted you to be aware of is how to stay in touch with us. If you click the help link under the single search bar on data.census.gov or visit the QR code, this will take you to a dedicated resource page with more gems on how to make the most of our site. You'll see short videos, recorded webinars, as well as upcoming workshops. Those are 2 to 3 hour opportunities for you to join us and get hands-on practice using our site. We also have put this training on today in conjunction with our colleagues in the Data Dissemination and Training branch. So there are data dissemination specialists that are a local resource for you. You can reach out to them directly for one-on-one assistance, and there's a specialist that covers your state. If you'd like to contact them, reach out at 1-844-ASK-DATA or census.askdata@census.gov. Not only do they provide that one-on-one assistance, they also provide free trainings and workshops for organizations, and they specialize across all things Census Bureau data. So my area that's providing the webinar today is focused specifically on data.census.gov and the API. The data dissemination specialists will provide trainings on a variety of topic and tools beyond just that. And you can also check out their content on census.gov/academy. And Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you to see if there's anything else or if we are wrapping up. Thank you all so much.
Well, there are no other questions on the line. Maria?
I think all of them have been answered as far as I have right now. So if anybody does have any questions, again, we are reached at census.data@census.gov.
Right, perfect. Okay, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.